Gesundheit! As you know, this is Measure of an Episode. Our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a good Star Trek episode, and not just good TV, or bad TV, or shitty TV, or any kind of TV. It has to be Star Trek for us to give a shit. I'm Paul.
I'm Jonathan.
And this week, we're watching a Voyager episode, Jonathan's favorite.
Yeah. Well, and it's your guilty pleasure.
Season 2, Episode 20, Investigations. It is my guilty pleasure. I love seeing the gang back together again. Back together again, but what I mean by that is I haven't watched the show in a while, and so when I see them, it's like they're all getting back together again for me.
Right, or they're leaving, which is what Paris did. But what's the blurb?
Okay. Paris leaves Voyager and joins a Talaxian space convoy. Not really what happens, but like they kind of bury the lead that it sounds like he's leaving Voyager like for a second, like for a vacation. That's not what happens. At least that's what I pulled from it before I watched the episode.
Oh, and I took it as leaving. So
so the second half of the blurb is Netflix helps smoke out the crew member who has been passing Federation secrets to the Kazon, which is a huge spoiler because what part of the show is that Neelix stumbles onto this, and it's a big moment for him and kind of a turning point. Like it's like one of the act outs, I think. You know, where the music swells, they zoom in on the character who's standing there silent.
Right, they do the soap opera glare. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like where they're not looking at, like they turn around to face they turn their back on the person they're talking to as the camera pushes in on them.
Okay, well, no, hang on. Did you mean to say Netflix?
Oh, is it not net? Oh, Neelix, right. Well, it's spelled almost exactly the same fucking way.
Oh, I know. But you read and Netflix discovers.
Totally on purpose.
Awesome. Great joke. Okay.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say?
Yeah. Okay. I have no idea. Okay, so the show starts out with a 10.5 minute long new show that Neelix is coming out with.
Yes.
And I would have been fine with this because it does set up sort of the whole conceit of the episode, which is everything is for this new morning show that Neelix has, that apparently this whole ship has time to watch in the morning. Anyway, so it's just way too long. It just goes on and on and on, to the point where he's spying on two crewmen making out in the hallway and then calls them out on it. Can you imagine the horror, especially if like they're both married or something?
Well, I would assume based on, well, I don't know. He didn't say their names. So yeah.
I thought he did. I thought he did say their names.
No.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. He said, so, you know who you are, and I wish you the very best to this happy couple. And like, yeah.
But he says it like he does know who they are and like everybody else knows who they are, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like when you're referring to somebody that everybody knows but you don't want to say it because you don't want to be that guy.
Well, yeah. So I'm wondering, like, yeah, is he like just being a passive-aggressive jerk?
I think he's being a gossip. He's being a dick gossip.
Oh, I know. Yeah, he's definitely...
That's his new detective name, Dick Gossip.
Dick Gossip.
But he's still a detective, so he's like a dick, and so he's Dick Gossip.
It's like Duck Goose.
Yeah. Well, that's his partner.
Gossip. Dick Gossip. Oh, Dick Gossip?
So it goes on for like way too long.
For me, I remembered this episode when it started because I remembered being confused and impressed, thinking that this was the new format to Voyager. That it was going to be, like every episode was going to start with Neelix kind of telling us other stuff that had happened, and it was going to be from his perspective of everything else that was happening on the show. And I was really kind of excited because it hadn't been done yet, and it would be a great way to see what was happening, kind of like the Lower Decks episode. And I think it would have been cool to have a show where it did only focus on one character while everything else was happening around them, because he was insignificant to all the decision making.
I had a fear that the whole episode was going to be told sort of through this kind of vlog format where he's always just talking to the camera and like almost it's like a diary of some sort, and it was all going to be through this video, and that's going to be the whole show.
Right.
Or more of it was going to happen, which it wasn't, thank God.
The episode was supposed to be completely from Neelix's perspective.
Really?
Yeah. The whole thing was almost like exactly what you said. It was supposed to be his newspaper. And and it was going to be that the whole time.
It was going to be like with a video type of thing, where there was like a video following him around.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I would have. I guess if they did it well, I would have liked it, because it would just be a new way to watch the show and a new way to sort of get a kind of behind the scenes look, because we don't usually get a point of view. At least it doesn't happen that often in Star Trek. It's normally an ensemble cast where we follow different people around, where it's never one character is in every single shot.
Right.
And that would have happened.
Yeah, I mean, he might have been out for a little bit where like he points the camera in a different direction, but he would still be in the scene even if he wasn't on camera at that moment. And it was actually the studio that jumped in, and they were like, no, we need other things happening.
Oh God, I think it's too much work to do that, because I mean, Neelix, the actor he does a great job, right? The guy who plays Neelix, for Ethan Phillips, I think is his name.
Yeah.
I mean, he has pages of stuff to learn when he's just talking to the camera, and there's no one to play off of. He's just giving a monologue into a camera.
Right.
So he does a good job at that. The one thing I've always not liked about Phoenix, John, Neelix. The thing I've always not liked about Neelix is that he's sort of one note in terms of emotional. He's always upbeat and happy, and it's in an annoying way. And maybe that's on purpose, but that doesn't make it any less annoying, except when he's super emotionally distraught. And those are the only two modes that Neelix has. It's the same reason that I don't like 7 of 9. She was just one note the whole time. Even Tuvok, I appreciated Tuvok because you could tell when he was in his science mode, when he was doing his science thing, or when he was in his I'm uncomfortable because I'm a Vulcan and someone's crying mode, right? There were at least levels. I don't know, I've shit on Tuvok in the past, but it. I don't know. I like him the most on the show. Him and the Doctor.
So as far as not Nimoy playing Vulcan, you prefer Tuvok?
I don't prefer Tuvok. He's not next in line to Nimoy.
Okay.
But juxtaposed to all of the other characters on this show, it's not so in your face with the character and the characterizations. I suppose Kes is the same way, but she's just not in the show enough, and she doesn't have enough to do. And so not enough opportunity to have a large range character-wise. At least not yet. I mean, I'm sure that she does in latter episodes, but she's just sort of the Doctor's assistant right now.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, and he had a different assistant in this episode. I don't know if you saw that. There was some random actual nurse who he handed something off to, and she continued to work on the patient. Oh, yeah.
No memory of that. So Neelix has the conversation with his old friend, another Talaxian, and he says that we're picking somebody up from your ship, Neelix. And Neelix is like, what are you talking about? I haven't heard about this. The captain didn't tell me that. Like, the captain has to tell him everything.
Right.
And so that sets off I guess the A plot. Anyway, the point of me saying all this is I have a list. And I have a list of things that he says where they take a normal word and put an alien word in front of it, and all of a sudden it's a new Star Trek thing.
Oh, there were so many things in this episode.
Yeah. Well, I caught 3.
Okay.
Maybe you can fill these in. So that you're a dilithium scrubber.
Yep.
And that was some sort of, he was ribbing him. That's an old rib for the Talaxians.
Well, okay. So to be fair though, I can get that one as being as like if you've ever watched Star Trek, that one made sense to me. Because I did catch it, but I was like, well, if you have to scrub the dilithium crystals or scrub the dilithium residue or whatever it would be, like you're kind of, you got the short end of the stick on that one.
I suppose, but the only reason we are putting it together is because we've heard that word before, dilithium.
That's
scrubber.
true.
We've heard both of those words before. But other than that, we have no idea what it means. It could be a really, there could be, a very sought after job.
Oh, who's that guy? Oh, he's the dilithium scrubber.
Yeah, it could be a rank for all we know. Anyway, he then says later in the episode, Pendrashian cheese. Oh no, it's the same conversation. So again, it's just cheese. You can just say cheese, right? Unless Pendrashian cheese isn't cheese.
Again, on that one, like you could say, you haven't brought me Swiss cheese in a while, or you haven't brought me what's another one? Like New England clam chowder. I know that's not cheese, but you're not just saying you haven't brought me soup. Like if there's somebody who brings you you haven't brought me Dutch chocolate. You haven't brought me this thing from your area that you know what I'm talking about. Like he could have said that cheese.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess, you smell like French onion soup.
Right.
is a bigger dig than you smell like soup. I don't know. It just gets tiresome. And the Leskarian egg, whatever that.
Yep, the Ascarian egg. Yep, that was the one that I caught. Egg.
Yeah.
Well, because that one was, like I've got Ascarian egg on my face. Like we've never. The phrase is you've got egg on your face. Like you don't need to specify what. Like I'm not like, oh, I've got chicken egg on my face.
You don't have to space it up for us. Like we got we're going to get the expression. So so he talks to Ensign Kim. He talks to Janeway and Tuvok, and they're acting kind of cagey, but we don't know why. And they tell him that Paris. Oh, because Neelix is finding out about somebody leaving, and they say, oh, it's Paris. And he's a little crestfallen because I guess he's good friends suddenly with Paris. I don't remember Neelix and Paris getting along until this moment. And so we find out that Paris is leaving. And what we also find out and what is reported to us is that Paris has been a real dick for the last little while.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, because they were kind of done writing him as a jerk, and so this episode was brought out more out of necessity than like making it a challenge. They wanted to get rid of him being a jerk, and they were like, all right, so let's just let's write this episode.
Oh, do you think that's what happened, or you don't think that they were seeding this particular episode?
No, that is what was happening. Based on the notes, like I couldn't infer whether or not they didn't have an end game. They didn't know what the end game was. But they did change his character. So
we get to the point where something happens to the warp core for some reason. And I'm getting the sense that because of this, the guy who was the ultimate bad guy who ends up sabotaging the ship, this is his way of communicating. So he sabotaged the ship to communicate with the, what are they called? The
Kazon.
The Kazon. The Kazon, they're just like sunburned Klingons, right? There's nothing different.
Well, they've got a weird like skin or bone crown on their heads. It's basically Klingon bedhead, but it also they have that weird kind of. It's like if Klingons let their forehead ridges grow out.
Yeah, I mean they seem to be kind of militaristic and brutish. They just seem like Klingon stand-ins to me.
They are a little bit less militaristic and more guerrilla warfare. They're ruthless scavengers, basically.
Right.
Almost Mad Max.
Yeah, you're right. So Paris leaves the ship, and it's reported to us later from Neelix's friend that he's been captured. And at that point, we cut to Tom Paris being captured, and we learn that Seska is behind it all. And a pregnant Seska. And then that reminded me of this whole Chakotay Seska thing. And I was just like, oh, it like all came rushing back to me. Sort of like putting your face in front of a fire hydrant.
Well, here's the thing about Seska showing up and, and all these, like Neelix's relative or friend rendezvousing with them. They are on a beeline mission to get back. They're not exploring this quadrant. They are trying to get home, and they're not backtracking at all. So it's like if I was going out to Tucson, and you needed to stop me on the way. Like you have to drive, you have to find me on this route out,
right? And
it's just there are so many moments in Voyager in the whole series, and this episode kind of highlighted it for me because of that. Where they're treated like Jackie Chan in all of Jackie Chan's movies, where they're on this mission just trying to get home, and everybody's like, "What are you doing? After him!"
Yeah. Everyone wants to kill Voyager.
Yeah,
throw ladders at him,
or they need Voyager for something. It's like, why they weren't in the quadrant up until 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and suddenly there's somebody on the ship or there's something on the ship that they desperately need. And how do you know that?
Well, they do have a sociopathic captain who keeps sticking her nose into things, but also like the idea that this happened. There's a weird geography problem, especially in this episode with Voyager, where they seem to have communication with people over the vast distances. Like Neelix talks to people from his homeland,
right?
And I sometimes lose track because I'm going to jump forward a little bit. So when Paris is escaping, spoilers, he escapes, and he's got his ship. He's talking to them over the comms, and And it's never established whether Janeway and Voyager can see the Kazon attacking Paris's shuttle. But they're having a conversation. They're like, we're almost in beaming range, but you don't get a sense. Are they close to them? I mean, it's my understanding you can't beam people unless they're relatively close. And so if they're almost within beaming range, they must be within visual range. And so if that's the case, shouldn't the Kazon who are attacking this piddly little shuttle stop doing that and start, addressing the bigger fish to fry,
right,
which is the gigantic Federation ship that's bearing down on them? So anyway, there's that weird geography thing where, like, okay, you can talk to him. Why can't you be firing phasers at, in his assistance?
Right. Well, yeah. And I mean, there's definitely something about the communication, because it was staticky and they weren't able to get a really solid signal. And then as it came on clearer, they were like, you're getting closer in range. So there definitely was something about when your message is clear, that's when you will be close enough.
Right, but in the same episode, Neelix was talking to somebody who was light years away, and it was a clear picture.
That's true. Yeah,
I think it was just narratively convenient that he's far enough away to just barely be in communications range, and then it's narratively convenient for them to be almost there to rescue him.
They do manage to get Paris out of the escape pod or whatever shuttle that he took, but then later they lock onto Jonas in the engine room, and they just beam his comm badge.
Right. Yeah, that was that's another weird Star Trek. I mean, it just doesn't make Star Trek sense, because when you lock on to somebody, they never say, oh, we're locked onto his comm badge. They may not use that to know which being they've locked onto, but it's not that you can only beam out someone wearing a comm badge. They've beamed out, like, chairs and shit, right? Like, it's not a matter of having unless all the chairs have comm badges on them.
Right. Well, and sometimes they use the comm badge for identifying things. They'll put their comm badge on an item and say, okay, beam that thing up. And they'll kind of do a sweeping transport of just stuff in that area. But yeah, as far as I knew, they logged onto your bioscans, which means they had your genetic code in the database, and they could scan the planet for your genetic code, find you, and beam you up.
Yeah. I mean, they have all different sorts of ways that they end up exploring in Next Gen.
Right.
But they they go just far enough where it's science fiction-y fun, but not too far where you start questioning the plausibility of something like this, because it is one of those technologies. It's like, oh my God, like this is magical. Like you need just enough information where it's not magic, but not too much where you're questioning it all the time.
Right.
One thing I don't know if they ever did this, but in the situation where they can't lock on to individual people, but they want to get people out quick, right, of whatever dangerous situation, where they just do a mass beam of the entire area where they know that there are people. But they don't just beam people, they beam the entire environment. So they're bringing up dirt and rocks and like just stuff. And it's just when they beam in, it's just literally they beamed the set from one place to another. And like they never did that. That would have been so cool to see them say, like, we can't lock onto people, get them out right now, just beam the whole area.
But I think the other thing too is that for the most part, the transporter, unless otherwise designated, only transports organic matter.
Well, but that does that. But there are times even in Next Gen where they're using the transporter to beam like luggage and stuff.
There is, yeah, but I think it has to be specified. So, like in an emergency, I think they would just say beam up all the organic matter in this radius, and I mean that would be everything. So you would have worms and any animals that were in that area,
like half a bird in flight.
Well, I feel like that's the other part of it too. Like if you had a radius, anybody who's halfway in that radius.
Yeah, well, they're only getting halfway beamed up.
Yeah. Well, they weren't going to survive anyway, so.
Yeah. They're lucky to be only half there,
So Neelix goes into the engine room and is trying to figure out who the mole is. And in the process, Jonas reveals himself to be the mole. Oh no, Paris came back on board. And then they disabled the Kazon ship. And
I'm trying to remember what happens after that. What?
Well,
wait a minute.
So Neelix goes into the engine room and is trying to figure out who the mole is. And in the process, Jonas reveals himself to be the mole.
When Neelix starts nosing around, he kind of does the guilty guy look.
I know.
You know, that nobody notices. And you're just like, who would, first of all, nobody acts like that. I felt like, first of all, the actor did a great job of doing what he was supposed to do, because it's really hard to act like, not like at all like what a human acts like. But so Neelix is poking around in the comms, right? Trying to find whatever information. And then the guy, Jonas, starts sneaking up with him. Like, his plan is to now murder Neelix in broad daylight in the engineering with this terrible gun thing.
Right.
What was his plan after that?
Yeah.
Because obviously there are cameras, because they've established that there are cameras in engineering.
Oh, so true.
So what was his fucking plan?
Right.
Maybe what he was thinking is, okay, my time on Voyager is coming to an end very soon.
Right.
So,
he's about to leave the ship anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that was the planning.
Worst case scenario, he'd get busted out of the brig. Right.
Maybe, but you wait a couple of hours until Neelix is sleeping, and then you go and murder him in his sleep or something.
Right.
What I would have preferred them to do is you have Jonas be the super helpful guy. You merge the super helpful guy that shows up that helps Neelix all the time and Jonas. You make them one character where he couldn't possibly be the bad guy.
Right.
And then when Paris eventually discovers who the mole is, that's when you reveal it and you're like, oh shit, it's that guy. I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the better reveal.
Yeah, I think for that to work, though, there needed to be something where upon rewatching, there would be a moment where you would go, oh, that's why he was doing that, or something like that. Because otherwise, if he's a super helpful guy and then suddenly the twist is that he's the mole, people don't accept it.
They don't accept it because he can't have possibly.
Yeah, like it was like it was thrown in at the last minute. They needed somebody to be the killer, so this guy's the killer. So the side-eye glance immediately tells the audience, okay, this guy's the killer. Like, obviously he overplayed it way more than he needed to.
But no, there was no question that the director said the audience needs to know you're the bad guy.
Right.
There's no in between. Either we don't know you're the bad guy or we know you're the bad guy.
Right. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, for them to have made him just the nice guy, there needed to be another scene somewhere where, you know, they asked him about those logs, or I guess if they took out the sidelong glances,
it would have been better. It would have been better.
Yeah, it absolutely would have been better. I'm just trying to think, if they had taken out all of the shifty eyes, like would the reveal have felt like a great twist, or like a
no? Because he does, even when he's helping Neelix, he is acting cagey, and that nobody notices. Obviously, like Neelix, Dick Netflix. What's his name? What do we call him? Dick
Gossip.
Dick Gossip. Dick Gossip has absolutely no knowledge, or like his ability to see when somebody's acting cagey is zero. So what you'd have to do is make him be super nice guy, super helpful, and then later you show Tuvok with one line saying, yeah, what he was doing is he was pulling the wool over your eyes. None of this makes sense, right? This is what he was doing, is he was leading you down a path where you couldn't have possibly discovered him with technobabble, right? And that would have handled that problem.
There had to be some way for it to be obvious that he was the bad guy, and not just the writers had to pin it on somebody, so they pinned it on the guy who was helping Neelix the whole time. Like, there was something where he gave the wrong information to Neelix, and if you knew technobabble, you would know that, like, the information he was giving didn't make sense.
Right.
Or,
I agree with that.
Yeah. You know, something like that where, something that planted the seed, even if he never secretly portrayed to the audience that he was the bad guy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point of a reveal. Like, you shouldn't, you don't want the audience picking up on anything, right? You don't want them to know. And that's the best way, is just to manipulate them in such a way where they can't possibly guess, which is the polar opposite of this episode. Because they obviously wanted us to know, right? Like, there was no mystery. I didn't feel any of that.
Well, and it would have been great if they didn't show any shadiness at all until Paris descattered the communication and saw that it was Jonas.
Yeah, when he makes when he has that revelation, it doesn't land. It's just like, oh yeah, we already knew that.
Right.
Like, good for you, Tom Paris. You're 5 minutes behind.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there's another scene where the other guy, the actual helpful guy, who I thought was definitely going to die, it's like, this guy is totally dead. But anyway, there's a point where he's pointing at the screen, and there's that what seems to be a Star Trek, definitely a Voyager trope, of an actor pointing at a screen that's got a bunch of wavy lines on it, and they're pointing like it's not corroborating with what he's saying, but it's just like a wavy line. He's like, as you can see here,
right? You see right here, yeah.
It's like, it makes no sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I feel like there's a lot of that. I mean, we already talked about Chakotay doing that, pointing to one part of a screen and then pointing to the other, and having to make it look like he knew what he was seeing.
So, do you think that they should have told Chakotay about the time?
Oh my god! So yeah, same thing. The actor who played Chakotay had a big issue with how it was revealed to him. But absolutely, the fact that she was like, we lied to you, and you did a great job of not knowing what was going on.
I know, it's so condescending.
Yeah,
it's like you did. It's like what you say to a 4-year-old when they pick up a piece of garbage and put it in the trash, right? Like it's not. It's. I would have been so pissed. I would have mutinied.
Right. Oh, I know. I don't think it was so much the scene in general. I think the fact that it was just played off with Janeway saying, "And you played your part very well," and that was the end of the conversation. Like, he didn't come back in and speak to her about it. She didn't go to him and say, it was a rash decision. I apologize, being my first commander. I should have concluded you. Anything like that. It was just, I trust the guy who used to be a Federal agent, who's a Vulcan Starfleet officer, who's now a Vulcan, and who was part of the Maquis and is now again on Starfleet.
Right.
Rather than a guy who used to be on Starfleet, turned away from Starfleet, became Maquis, and is now part of Starfleet again. One of the things that I kind of realized after watching this episode, first off, I get how it's your guilty pleasure. Like, this episode was fun. I didn't find it eye-rollingly bad. I was entertained the whole time. But it made me think about the criteria about the A plot versus B plot, because these two were so closely intertwined that
they're very well connected. Yeah, they're so connected.
Yeah. That I think the amendment just has to be if there are two characters being followed. We're following two character storylines.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I think you can have. I don't know. I mean, I think we need more iterations of this concept where one character is the focus of two plots, which is kind of like this felt very much kind of like a Hardy Boys detective book.
Yes.
Where Neelix has sort of gotten in over his head in something, and he's really into it, and it's sort of a bottle episode in that I don't think this ever comes back to this level where he's investigating things, but yeah, I actually really liked. I mean, to me, this is definitely a Star Trek episode for sure, because it has an A plot, B plot. They are connected. One is more personal, the other one is more plot driven, and it I don't know, it met all the criteria. There was a lot of science happening in it, a lot of science fiction. It was very over technobabbled to me. There's like 25% too many exchanges of words that don't make any sense. They do that a lot in this show with B'Elanna. She's always just vomiting technobabble.
Well, yes. So I was thinking about that with the original series. When somebody's talking, B'Elanna, she's talking about the comm logs, and she starts listing off technobabble logs. I was like, you don't need to say all that. Just say you have access to all of these logs, or don't go into these logs. Point to the screen, circle in this area, and say don't do that. And then the million Kelvin, I think, was the degrees. Yeah,
they start getting which is a ridiculous temperature, by the way.
Right,
they're all just ridiculous temperatures.
Oh yeah, but they didn't need to say that. Like, it needs to be within the safe parameters. We're reaching the limit of the safe parameters. We've exceeded the safe parameters. Like, you don't need to throw in the technobabble to convey the tension.
Yeah, and I agree. You need some. Right? But I think the difference between Voyager and Next Gen, there was always a question posed to Geordi. And Geordi would give a technobabble answer, and it would usually make sense. But there wasn't an exchange between two engineers passing, bullshit back and forth.
Right.
It was always Picard or whoever had a question for Geordi. Can we get out of here? I don't know, Captain. I have to do this and that to the warp core, etc. And that was usually the end of it.
Right.
or it was, whatever it had to be. And so, but in this, there's back and forth, and it just gets laborious after a while. And again, like you said, the tension is created. They don't need to keep ping-ponging this stuff back and forth.
It doesn't need to be thrown in just to be like, look, we're doing Star Trek, so let's do this technobabble.
Yeah, and somebody had it out for the actress who plays B'Elanna, because she nails it every time, right? Sometimes, like for example, the doctor, Beverly Crusher from Next Gen, you can tell she's just hanging on with that stuff. When she has a bunch of lines where it's just nonsense, she can just get it out. Where B'Elanna, I think her name is Roxanne Dawson, every time she's just right on it and she's snapping them out, right? And she must like have a photographic memory or something like that, because it's all, you always believe it. It's kind of too bad, because she was either doing the Klingon thing where she's struggling with her Klingon self, or she's just spouting technobabble the whole time.
Yeah.
And I wonder if somebody hated her, or like, I don't know, because it seems like such a lot of work, because you have to memorize all that stuff.
Right. Well, and speaking of memorizing, Neelix, this is just a little aside. His whole opening monologue, he got the night before, and oh,
you're kidding me?
No, and he spent all night just memorizing it, and he said, and it had to be memorized, and it had to be one take.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know how many takes.
Yeah, there's no cuts.
Took.
Yeah, there's no cuts. Yeah. So another small thing, when Paris is escaping in the Kazon shuttle, he gets hit by a couple of phaser blasts, and he's the worst flopper ever.
Oh, I know.
It was so unconvincing. Whereas if you look at, there are some people who are just really good at it.
Right.
They got really good on Next Gen. Like kind of, when they're shaking the camera and everybody has to kind of feel like the ship is shaking.
Yes.
By the way, that whole concept doesn't make sense. The idea that you can go from 0 miles an hour to 100 million miles an hour in a ship, and you're just standing there. There's not like, whoa, we kind of accelerated a little too fast there. That doesn't happen. But when you get hit by a tiny little phaser blast, the whole ship shakes. So no one has ever really explained why that is. And I know that I'm being a super annoying nerd right now, but not even on Next Gen, which is the pinnacle of science fiction, in my opinion, science fiction television. They never explain that. I know that they have the whatever dampeners. Fine. That's great. That's a great way to handle like gravity and all that stuff. They have inertial dampeners, but they should all, like, when they go from zero to warp, they're like,
there should be some kind of lurch. That's what you're saying.
There should be something, or make it so that whenever you get hit by a phaser, it immediately takes the inertial dampeners offline, right? Say that. Because you wouldn't move around. There would be no moving around. There would just be, if they're that strong, where they can maintain gravity no matter what acceleration you're going at, then these things would be, they're a bigger deal than the transporters in terms of technology, these inertial dampeners.
So the way I interpreted it was that the ship knows how to automatically correct for the ship's navigation.
So the ship knows what it's doing, and so therefore it can compensate for any kind of motion that's not just regular 1G gravity.
Right.
That's the idea?
That's how I always interpreted it, was that as the pilot, you're controlling it, the ship knows how to react to those things and responds accordingly. When it's being attacked from an outside force, like a tractor beam or a phaser blast or anything like that, photon torpedo, like it can only adjust so quickly. So it still is going to have that initial reaction and then compensation. So in that reaction, that's why they're shaking and they're not, tumbling around all over the place.
Yeah, this is the part where people are going to fast forward through. This is the part.
Yes.
This is why nerds get their nerd stigma.
This whole show is why we get our stigma.
We don't get into the weeds like that very often.
I guess that's true.
Right?
But we are discussing and analyzing Star Trek. So, all right. So then you're saying this is a Star Trek episode. What is the sci-fi conflict? Because I felt it was a good spy show, but I didn't think that there was a sci-fi conflict to it.
I don't know if there was a singular science fiction conflict. I think that there was plenty of expressions of science fiction as Neelix was investigating all of these things, right? They had the comms thing, and that whole thing of how they masked the communications through. I forget what the exact thing, but something having to do with the warp core and how like they were using the warp core in such and such a way, like the exhaust of the warp core to communicate with the Kazon ship, because it just made it look like background radiation, and it was genius. Even Neelix says, "Oh, that's a genius. That's amazing that they figured that out." Like that was a cool science fiction little nugget there, and I think it's peppered throughout enough for me for it to be eligible, I guess. And of course, the non-sci-fi resolution was throwing the bad guy over a balcony into the warp core.
Problem solved.
Because I like the idea that they can't have a prisoner on the ship, but they can't just have the captain offing people when they decide that they're bad guys, even they might deserve it. So they have to kill them or make them leave, right? Right. Because you can't just have a prisoner for 18 years on the ship. It would not be nice.
Yeah.
So they have to kill him, and they throw him over the balcony, which I got the impression that was not something that you could do at all times, but there was some sort of malfunction with the ship, which was creating this void that you could throw somebody into, right?
Yeah, that was the impression that I got too. It was I assumed it was from the previous problem they had.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's good, because that would be a huge design flaw.
Right. Yeah, have a little bit too much synthahol and vaporized.
Yeah, we keep losing people all the time.
All right, well, on this episode, it's so your AI, man, this randomizer. Like I'm abstaining from voting. I don't agree, but I don't disagree strong enough to fight you on it.
Well, you just hate Voyager too, so that's definitely coming into play here.
Right, but I enjoyed this episode. But I don't feel like there was enough sci-fi. The sci-fi wasn't integral to the plot. Like you talking about how they found a secret way to send messages. Like that's what happens in war all the time. Like we used Navajo in World War II. So I don't feel like that was legitimately a sci-fi conflict or element to the plot that could only happen in Star Trek.
I suppose you could be right. I felt like this kind of goes into maybe what pushes it over the ledge for me, to bring it back so I did. Is they're clever about it, right? It's not just a matter of handling something. Like, for example, the previous thing that with the virus, it was, instead of it just being a one line, this is an alien virus that infects people, and that explains everything, and it takes less than 10 seconds to say, versus this slow progression of discovery, and it's done with science fiction-y elements that to me, I think, give it a little bit more character. And so I appreciated that, and I liked how they did it. It was kind of a good mystery. It could have been better, like we said.
See, and I would say it waves it away in a single line, the same way that the virus did. You know, they're trying to figure out how he's sending these communications, and they're like, "Oh no, he's done it this way. Oh, that's genius."
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe if I find it clever enough, then I'll let it slide. If it's not clever, then I don't like it. Maybe I'm happy for that to be it.
Well, and I mean, I will concede they did peel back more layers this time around than they did with Luoxana. It was just she had a headache, then other people had a headache, and we saw that happening, but they didn't try to figure it out as they went. It was just solved in the last 5 minutes. Now, it wasn't solved with the MacGuffin. You know, it wasn't something that had never been seen before, and now, you know, it was just randomly in the vents and they figured out what to do. But it was, you know, okay, you're suffering from menopause, basically.
Well, it was almost as if they wrote the episode and then realized they need a science fiction aspect, and so they went back and gave everybody a headache, and it took 5 minutes to update. Versus this Voyager episode, it seemed like these waypoints in the story, where these science fiction waypoints were necessary to make the storyline go forward, and they were written, they were integral to it, as opposed to just afterthoughts. Right.
I mean, I think I will agree that this episode was written better. But I disagree that the moments were sci-fi. I think that they were just written in a sci-fi way because it was Star Trek, but this episode could easily have been on some kind of period war show.
Yeah, I mean, it's Voyager. It's borderline for me because I don't know. It wasn't hard science fiction by any means, but I appreciated the episode. It was nice, and it is, like I said, it's a guilty pleasure. I enjoy it.
And I enjoyed the episode too. I thought it was fun.
I guess this is just a null episode then.
Yeah. Kind
Right?
of a Star Trek episode. Kind of a good episode.
Yeah.
It's just kind of an episode.
All right. Fine. All right. Well, let's see what the next one's going to be. Maybe we'll get lucky.
Right?
You know? Probably not, though.
All right. This one is an original series episode. It's The Savage Curtain, Season 3, Episode 22. Original air date was March 7th, 1969. And the blurb is Kirk. Yes! Oh, I'm so excited.
Bar for excitement there.
Kirk, Spock, Abraham Lincoln, and Sirach are pitted in battle against 4 notorious villains from history. Yes!
Wait, who's the fourth
Sirach.
person?
He's a Vulcan philosopher.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't believe we got to this one so early.
Because like the description, if this had been a next gen description, I would have had different level of excitement than knowing that it's an original series episode, right?
Right. Yeah. Like this one. Oh man, I'm so excited to find out whether or not this is actual Star Trek, and I think it is, despite how bad it is.
Oh, so it's gonna be bad. Oh.
I mean,
right.
It's got Abraham Lincoln in space. Like,
I know.
We're not talking deep writing here.
Well, they did have, I mean, I guess it's in space. I mean, I was going to say they did have Mark Twain on Next Gen.
Yep.
They had, who did they actually have? Because they had simulations of people like Einstein, but they never had, I think that they had other people. Anyway, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
All right, man. Let's go watch it.
All right.